Okay, today is my lesson on market research. Okay, so probably two lessons worth of work, but a really common evaluative question in your exam. Okay, so we'll start off with what is market research. We'll learn the definition. It's gathering information about consumers' needs and preferences. Okay, so your consumer is the person who uses your product, and you want to find out basically what you can do to change to satisfy them, so they're happier, therefore they'll pay a higher price, they'll buy more of it, etc., and you'll be competition. So it's essentially something that's going to make your business more competitive. So the things this lesson is going to do: number one, what is it and why do business do it? Number two, what is primary and what is secondary research? Number three, we're going to compare the two, primary versus secondary, so you can evaluate between the two. That's the most common sort of 9 and 12 mark question at GCSE Business. And then number four, I want you to understand key terms such as what is sampling and then what is quantitative and qualitative data. Okay, two pictures just to start off. We've got bottom left, we've got what I tried to find somebody sort of asking a questionnaire or survey. That's gathering information firsthand. That's what we'd call primary. We've got another primary picture on the right, which is trying to represent a focus group where you're sort of conducting an interview with various people to get their feedback. Okay, so these are two primary methods, but just something to imagine as we go through it. So why do businesses conduct market research? Okay, so the bullet points at the top, you want to identify what customers' needs, identify gaps in the market. If there's no competition there, then you're going to have more market power, be able to charge a higher price and receive more demand. Reduce risk. This is a good one to analyze. So basically you do market research so that you're not going to make more mistakes. You're not going to think to yourself, that classic Dragon's Den program that we've all seen where somebody goes on Dragon's Den and they think their product's amazing, but actually the dragons tell them that there isn't actually any demand for this product, and therefore you're going to risk everything you put into the business to then not get any success. Then inform business decisions. One word I really like seeing in answers is the word strategy, business strategy. So, for example, if you have this information, it informs business decision, or you could say the business could change their strategy because they now have some research that improves their strategy. Okay, so we've got a little mind map here of the uses of market research. If I just show you the bottom four: price, product, place, promotion. Hopefully that's kind of ringing bells as being the 4Ps. So in fact, you can always say, why do you do market research? And then just go back to the 4Ps. 4Ps is so crucial in marketing. So, okay, it can help inform about price. It can help inform about how to change the product, best place, best promotion, etc. So you can always use the 4Ps to explain why market research is important. And then also you can think about, actually finding out more information about the market. If you ever hear the market, what we mean is we mean customers and we mean competition. Okay, so you'll find out more about your customers, you'll find out more about your competition as well through doing it. So it's the 4Ps and the market that you'll find out information from. Okay, so methods of primary research. Okay, I've got a few here that you'll need to know. So one of the most common ones you'll be asked about is questionnaires. So to conduct market research, you'll go out, you'll write a survey, write a questionnaire, and you'll get people to answer it. Something to be aware of, some problems with questionnaires: if they have questions which are all closed answers or all open questions, you don't necessarily get that much information. So an open question will be something where it expects the person to answer it, to maybe give their opinion and to explain. When a closed questions is that kind of, I think it's a very good method, or I give it 5 out of 10, or just simple yes or no question. So have a balance of open and closed questions. Clear and simple. Sometimes you don't really understand what question is asking. Make sure it's not leading, pushing them to say something, and it's quick. Questionnaires can sometimes annoy the people you're asking. They can think it's actually a bit tedious. They just want to, they're stopping in the street to maybe help out, but then they don't actually want to think negatively of your company just because they're being annoyed by it. Okay, so questionnaires, you can do it through the post, telephone, on the street, online as well. Okay, and then we got focus groups. So focus group is that picture I showed at the start, where you get a group of people together and it's a much more in-depth conversation. They can actually one person can say something and the other person can comment on that, and you can get a lot more detailed information from a focus group. Observation. Often you might just go somewhere and actually observe, right? Okay, how many people is going into this cafe at this time? What type of cars are parking in this car park? So Observation is a very common one as well. And then last one is test marketing, where you launch the product to a small area, and then you get feedback from the people who got to use that product. So it's like a pre-release type, testing out the prototype, and then you can find out information about the product before it goes out. They'll do it a lot with sports shoes and things like that. So an athlete will receive a pair of shoes and use them, and they give feedback about how they performed. Okay, so there's a good list of primary research methods there. Here we've got methods of secondary research. Now, something about primary is data that the business is collecting. Okay, so it's something that did not exist before, and it can be called field research. Secondary research is something that already exists. That's the definition. Okay, it's something that already exists as opposed to something that the business collected firsthand. So all the ways that you can collect this information that already exists, businesses' websites, don't just say the internet. Okay, a lot of students will say the internet, and that's too generic. There's quite a few specific websites that you can talk about rather than saying the internet. So are you talking about a business website? Are you talking about government data which is available online? Are you talking about an annual report which is available online? So be specific about what website you're talking about. But yeah, you can go onto a business's websites and find out information about your competitor. What price are they charging? I'd just go onto their website to do that. Okay, so from competitors, you can get their annual reports where they'll post all their financials and their shareholder information. Any materials from your competitors, like their catalogs and things like that. Internal data. So it's considered secondary if you get information from, let's say, your finance department. That is considered secondary. It's from within your company. You haven't collected it. Government publications, this is quite big. In the UK, the government do a survey called Census. It comes out periodically, and they'll ask all households to fill in information about how much they earn, what religion they are, things like that. But it actually creates this data of, this geographical region actually is a rich area or a poor area, or an Asian area, or I don't know, an old area, So and then that obviously is going to have a big impact on what business you are, and whether you should target your products in that area. Okay, so the government publications is quite a nice one to choose. It's easy to explain why it's good. It's very much secondary. The government have collected it, therefore I would argue probably it's going to be quite reliable, and then it can really inform business decision. Commercial publications. Okay, so there's the company down there, says Mintel or Verdict. Basically, some companies will conduct market research and then businesses will buy it from them. Okay, so that's a commercial publication. So it's good because they'll be specialists in collecting the data. So if you're a smaller business, it's useful to actually get a specialist to give you the real data. It saves you a lot of time. And then media as well. When you do essays in IB or A level, you'll often use a lot of newspapers and reference those. So that's doing secondary research. Okay, so when you come to doing your evaluation question, a 9 or 12 mark question, it doesn't really matter if it's 9 or 12, because if it's a 12, they're probably just going to ask you about one, but you'd always compare it to the other. If it's 9, they'd say, look, which one to do. So evaluating primary versus secondary. Well, I've just got the pros and cons of each, but as you can see, they actually are the opposites. So you can kind of look at the positives of both and then just contradict them when you want to evaluate. So let's look at primary, collecting the information yourself, data that did not exist before. Well, first of all, if you're collecting it yourself, it's going to be up to date. It's not 10 years old. It's current situation right now. Okay, so that could be much more reliable. The business environment changes, so that's up to date. It's going to be more useful. Competitors do not have it. If you collect the data, you therefore don't have to share it with them. Therefore, you could have a competitive advantage through that. And also specifically addresses the business needs. Sometimes you'll find if you Google something, you're finding out information, but it's not exactly what you wanted, but maybe you can work with it. When if you do primary research, you're collecting it yourself, you're designing it yourself, therefore it will specifically answer the questions that you want. Right, let's have a look at the benefits then of just finding information that already exists. Okay, secondary information. Well, first of all, it's really fast. Okay, so you don't actually have to go out and survey 1,000 people. You find a survey which has been done, data's there, and you can just grab it. So relatively, it's much quicker. Also, if you're Googling something in the news, the internet is just one big database of information, and Google will just, filter out the information that you want. Therefore, it's quick as well. Okay, it's cheap. if primary is taking a long time, if you're paying staff to conduct that, it's going to be expensive. When secondary, it's possibly something that's online and free, therefore it's cheap. And I think really with this one, I'm talking about government publications. It's reliable if conducted by larger organisations. Okay, so same with using Mintel or something like that. They're going to be specialists or organisations that you trust. It doesn't always have to be reliable. That's sort of there to be evaluated instantly, to be honest. But if it's done by a bigger company, then you can think to yourself, right, the government census is something I can rely on. Okay, so then when you're evaluating one, so if you want to say actually primary is not the best, you've got the opposite. It's expensive, time consuming, but then also consider that whole questionnaire, questioning people in the street, it might annoy them and damage your reputation. Secondary research, what's the problem of doing secondary research? Well, your competitors have the same info, so the competitive advantage of finding something that was online, everybody has it. It's not always trustworthy. We know that things are posted online which aren't always true, and also sometimes you find something that's 5 years 5 years old, and you think to yourself, okay, I'm going to use that, but things have moved on since then, so it can be out of date. So essentially, what I like to see from my students in their essays, in their conclusion, is actually why not do both. I think every single business that does market research will do secondary. Would every business do primary? Possibly not. But if we're talking about a big business that can easily do primary, there's no chance they're not going to do secondary. There's no chance they're not going to have Googled their competitor and checked out their website. So I just think a conclusion is always good to do both. I think it shows the examiner that you're actually being a lot more real, than just going with the theory. And often questions are pushing you to commit to one. And actually, I think it's high-level thinking to think to yourself, actually, I don't need to commit to one. Evaluation would be, realistically, I'd be doing both here. So conclude with that. That'd be good. Okay, my last objective for the lesson was to think about sampling and quantitative and qualitative. What does this mean? So sampling is who do you ask to answer your questions? Where do you go to get the information from? That's sampling, okay? And the reason you need to think of a sample is because you cannot ask the whole population. You don't have time to do that. So you need to think of, who am I going to ask to get these data from? All right. So you could do it in a couple of ways. You could think to yourself, right, well, I'm currently selling my bicycles to middle-aged men. So then you choose to just ask middle-aged men. Or you might be a more mass market product and think, actually, I need to do random sampling. I don't want to pick anybody for any particular reason. I don't want to pick a particular age. I just want to pick anybody at random. Okay, so picking names out of a hat is random. So sampling is who do you choose to collect the data from? And then there's different methods such as random. And the other one, if you do have a strategy for who you're going to ask, i.e. the kind of middle-aged men who typically buy your bikes, that would be called stratified sampling, the bottom bullet point. So you've got a strategy of who you're asking. So at GCSE, you don't really get many questions on sampling, but you do need to know what it is, and just think random sampling or stratified sampling. Later on, if you do this at A-level or IB, you'll hear about things like snowball sampling, where somebody answers your questionnaire, then they pass it on to somebody, and then they pass it on. So there's different types of sampling as well, but GCSE, just random and stratified. Okay, there's some limitations of market research then, which are evaluations but weren't included on the primary versus secondary, is we can consider whether the research is dependable. Okay, so was it biased? Were you able to actually ask a sample? The start of the questionnaire, it might say, how old are you and what gender are you? And the reason they're doing that is maybe just to check who was their sample on that day that gave them that data. And if you sometimes ended up going somewhere where you had 80% female, 20% male respondents, maybe you could actually say, you know what, let's evaluate our research. It wasn't the best sample. It was quite a biased sample. So that's a general limitation of market research. Did you use the right sample? Human behavior, you can evaluate by talking about people's answers. Were they honest? They often give an answer which they think the interviewer wants to hear or makes them look good or something like that. Sometimes people answer because they know what the right answer is, but they don't necessarily do it. So you can always question whether people are being honest. And then poor research technique, you can also question whether the interviewer had training, the questionnaire was right, was the right method used? Again, just maybe in reflection, think actually there could have been a better way to do it. So there's just three general limitations that you could use as well to evaluate. Okay, the final key questions then for today is quantitative and qualitative, and this refers to the types of data. If your market research collects quantitative data, it's information that can be expressed in numbers. Okay, so if you're saying how many chocolate bars do you buy per month, you've got a number that's quantitative. Now, the good thing about quantitative data is you can make graphs out of it, tables. It's very easily presented and it's really easy to interpret. You can very quickly look at it and be like, wow, that's the most common number of chocolate bars to be bought each month. However, sometimes if we ask open questions, we'll get qualitative information. And this has got attitudes and emotions and opinions. They've had to explain themselves in this open question. Now, when I get that information, it's very difficult for me to make a graph of it because I don't want to read through everybody's responses, which are probably unique, but try and group them. That can be really difficult. So it's different in terms of its presentation, but actually what it does do is it actually tells us more and maybe gives us more direction, more strategy. It tells us the reasons behind something. So although more time consuming, it might be more valuable. Okay, right. That's the end of market research. There'll be some tasks to follow. Thank you.